All right, hell yeah. I've been waiting to make this video all week. UFC 322 preview from my hometown of New York, New York. It's the Madison Square Garden card. It seems like the UFC likes to have every year now. And it's usually a banger, and this is one of the best cards of the year. We got JDM versus Islam, Valentina versus Zhang and Weili, and what's probably going to be one of the best women's fights in the history of the promotion. Brady versus Michael Morales, combined record 36-1. Leon Edwards and Carlos Prates, and we're going to talk about all those fights and more. And I'm actually going to start with the main event in this video. We'll start with the main event, and then we'll talk about the undercard, and then we'll end with the so-called co-main event of this card, which we will have a detailed breakdown of as well. It's just so hard for me to pick against Islam. Everybody's picking JDM, it feels like, and I can't help but to think that it's linked to sort of a desire to see these top-ranked pound-for-pound Dagestani Russian fighters knocked off the top from a good amount of the global MMA fan base, and more of a response to seeing something like Pereira dominating that second Ankalaev fight and the fan response to that. I certainly loved seeing that, and I would love to see JDM KO Islam. And listen, there's a lot of things in his favor. I think JDM actually truly is a better striker. I think that he's got a size advantage that Makhachev hasn't faced before, but I don't think he's necessarily the best fighter that Makhachev has ever faced.
That's Volk, obviously. But JDM is the best fighter that Islam has ever fought who's anywhere near his own size.
JDM also has excellent submission defenses. He's got excellent takedown defense, and he's definitely going to be able to negate some of what Islam can do. But you can tell by my tone of voice that even all of that put together still isn't enough, because Makhachev isn't actually that much physically smaller than JDM. And Islam is all about control. The fight is all about controlling the pace, controlling the tempo, and enforcing your will on your opponent and enforcing your will on the fight however you can. Now, JDM has good enough submission defense, I think, to avoid being submitted early in this fight, but I think once the rounds wear on and he gets tired, I think then you could see that become a spot of weakness. And I look at the DDP versus Chimaev fight for how this fight might go, where, yeah, DDP was the biggest fighter that Chimaev had ever faced, but it ultimately didn't matter because Khamzat's grappling was too good. DDP's limbs were really long and hard to get a hold of, and that stopped him from being able to actually clinch in a submission, which I think is very likely in this fight as well. But it didn't stop him from actually controlling the fight. 5 minutes is a long time, no matter how good your striking is, no matter how good your takedown defense is, to stop Islam Makhachev from taking you down if that's what he's determined to do. And I know that that's his game plan in this fight. Everyone's been talking about how, JDM has Volk in his camp. He's got Craig Jones in his camp. But I don't see how that stops Islam Makhachev if Islam Makhachev's camp recognizes the very simple fact about this fight, that Islam is outmatched on the feet here. And there's really no point to him standing and trading with JDM unless it's after he's already asserted himself on the ground and tired JDM out. And Islam is a fighter who has and knows a ton of different ways to tire you out, a ton of different ways to drain that gas tank. And ultimately, it's just a brutal first title defense for JDM, who's a great fighter, who's definitely good enough to be the welterweight champion, who's obviously a candidate for a move up to middleweight, even though some of these middleweights these days are gigantic. So I understand why he stays at welterweight, because he is a really big welterweight, JDM. And I get that this is a new weight class for Islam, and that's why a lot of people, think that he doesn't have a chance. But, that's laughable to me. I think that's all the more reason why Islam would go with his strength, go with the ground game, and try to dominate on the ground. Although, let's be real, Islam isn't like these other Dagestani fighters where he's really about the ground game and there's a little striking. Islam is a all-around fighter. He's a pound-for-pound guy. There's a reason why he's been the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in mixed martial arts for so long. That's not an accident. 53% career takedown accuracy, 71% career significant strike accuracy. You start off softening him up on the ground, and then you can start working on the feet. And you know what? If JDM wants to trade on the feet, and if he's still got something to him, just shoot again. I have no idea how many times Islam is going to shoot in this fight, but he's just going to keep going until he gets JDM down. I'm telling you. And I honestly don't know why at 5'10", a weight change up to 170 would hurt Makhachev. I think it would actually make him stronger and maybe make him a little bit better of a wrestler. I don't know that this isn't actually more of Islam's natural weight class than JDM's. I think JDM might be more of a natural middleweight or even a light heavyweight if he wants to, actually show up and fight at his actual walk around weight, which imagine that. Nobody in the UFC does that. Why the hell would anybody do that? But Makhachev, I'd imagine being at 145 and of course and 155, where he's one of the greatest of all time, was probably exhausting and not a very fun weight cut, and he's up at 170 and a lot, healthier. And I expect him to be stronger. I expect his strengths to be stronger, and I expect him to win this fight, probably by a decision, but I think that a late round submission is also borderline possible. I understand why people are picking JDM, though. I don't really understand why the majority of people are picking it, but I understand why people are picking JDM. I think JDM could win this fight by KO. That would definitely be the most entertaining conclusion to this fight, probably the one that I would want to see on pure entertainment value, and it would definitely be a star turn for JDM that he deserves because he's a miraculous talent. But Islam Makhachev is too much. It's just a little too much for JDM right now. I think that people are actually sleeping on Islam in this one a little bit. All right, now we're going to talk about the undercard, and let's start with Angela Hill versus Fatima Kline. And Fatima Kline came through big for me the last time I predicted one of her fights. I predicted her to beat Melissa Martinez, and she produced a stunning knockout. And Angela Hill, very obviously here, is an opponent who struggles with defense, 15 losses. Definitely one of the more respected and long-standing veterans in women's MMA and in the women's strawweight division. But she's just that because, let's be real, she's not necessarily expected to win. She's just expected to fight. She's a fighter, Angela Hill, and you have to respect her. But she's here for Fatima Kline to show her skills against. That's the kind of fight that this is. I think Fatima Kline is a great fighter. I think that she'll beat Angela Hill. She'll probably win by KO. If not, she'll win by a pretty wide decision. Angela Hill at 40 years old, unfortunately, probably will struggle a bit with cardio. I think Fatima Kline will also have an advantage there. So this is a fairly one-sided one for me. I'm picking Fatima Kline. And I think a similar thing is going to happen in Meerschaert versus Daukaus. Daukaus? I'm not sure which one. Let me know if I'm pronouncing that wrong. I'm going to pronounce it Daukaus. But Meerschaert struggles with defense as well. He got knocked out by Michael Olajaychuk in his last fight in the first round. Kyle Daukaus is coming off a first-round knockout in his last fight at UFC Shanghai. He knocked out Michael Pereira on the Walker versus Zhang undercard. So, you got a guy with 20 losses who's just got knocked out in the first round versus, not an up-and-comer, 32 years old, but at 16-4 record, just got a first-round KO. Not really a history of fighting well-known guys in the UFC, so it'll be a decent step up for Daukaus in his career to fight Gerald Meerschaert and to probably knock out Gerald Meerschaert. This would be a good fight to put a round 1 KO bet on, in my opinion. Next up, I want to talk about Malcolm Wellmaker versus Cody Haddon, and this is a great fight between two up-and-coming bantamweights who are very excited and are just all about action. Wellmaker doesn't go to the ground. He's a pure striker. Cody Haddon, I think, is going to be a pure striker in this fight. If anybody were to make this fight go to the ground, it would be him, but I don't think that's going to happen. I think this is going to be an absolute striking fest, and that's why this fight was made. It's going to be a fight that I think is going to get some support for Fight of the Night, although it's going to have some strong competition for that title on the main card. I'm picking Wellmaker in this fight, but I wish this fight could be 5 rounds. I wish we could see these guys just go at it for 25 minutes. It'll be fun for 15, though. I think Wellmaker has a narrow size advantage. I think that there always does come a time for undefeated strikers. I think for Wellmaker, it's more likely that would be a person who has some kind of physical size advantage. I don't think that Cody Haddon is the guy to break Malcolm Wellmaker's undefeated streak. That's essentially the way that I'm seeing it. So I am going to pick Malcolm Wellmaker. Don't be surprised at all if Cody Haddon wins this fight. He's only a plus 125 underdog. He's got a lot of talent, 9.2 significant strikes per minute. He can take you down, which Wellmaker can't do in response, and it's only a 3-round fight. So that's also a possibility in this one. That would be unfortunate, though. I think this fight could be an absolute war for 15 minutes, and I'm going to pick Malcolm Wellmaker to stay undefeated. And now Erin Blanchfield versus Tracy Cortez. And I think this is a little bit closer of a fight than people are making it out to be. I think Tracy Cortez's talent gets overlooked a bit, actually. I think she's a better fighter than people give her credit for. Just because she's hot doesn't mean she can't fight. But I do think there is a slight skill gap between her and Blanchfield. Blanchfield's younger, of course, too, more the up-and-comer, but I also think that Blanchfield is a slightly more talented fighter. I think there's a lot of things that Blanchfield can do in the octagon that Cortez just can't. That being said, Cortez can make this fight very active if she gets taken down if she gets rocked, she just has to stay as tough as she can be. If she's in situations that she can't control, she has to make herself present on the ground, especially if she's on the bottom. If Blanchfield has top control and takes her down, she needs to make herself present on the bottom so that she can try to steal 2 of these rounds in this 3-round fight, because that's Tracy Cortez's best chance. She has to try and go out of her way to make herself be the one who's noticed, land those big shots, throw some uppercuts, throw some elbows from the bottom, throw some punches to the body from the bottom, and to be the fighter who gets that benefit of the doubt. Because at the end of the day, I think that Blanchfield just has an edge and skill both on the feet and on the ground. And that in a way, this is going to be a very tough fight for Tracy Cortez if she looks at it from the perspective of trying to control the fight. I think that if Tracy Cortez is the one who initiates the grappling, she could get herself in a lot of trouble and end up on the bottom. And that she could actually do herself some harm by being the one to initiate takedowns. Sure, you're the underdog, and you'd think in the moment initiating a takedown would help you win one of these very important 3 rounds if you get a takedown. But once you take down Blanchfield, that can really be where the trouble starts. And of course, the reason why Tracy Cortez would take down Blanchfield so aggressively is that Blanchfield is the one with the edge on the feet. So ultimately, I think it behooves Tracy Cortez to just be aggressive both on the feet and on the ground. Be a little dirty, be a little scrappy. Don't be afraid to get in the clinch. Don't be afraid to use some Muay Thai. Don't be afraid to throw knees. Don't be afraid to throw elbows. Tracy Cortez is going to have to make this fight nasty and take the fight to Erin Blanchfield if she wants to win this fight. But I'm going to predict Erin Blanchfield to win this fight because I think this is too hard of a fight for Tracy Cortez. And it's true to a certain extent that Tracy Cortez's obligations outside of the ring, although I'm not trying to get too much on her for that, but it's true that her obligations outside of the ring, her status as a face in the UFC and is a celebrity. It's true that Blanchfield's just in the gym. Blanchfield's just being a mixed martial artist. She's only 26. She's on the come up. The ceiling for Erin Blanchfield could very well be well beyond this, well beyond Tracy Cortez in this division. So I'm picking Erin Blanchfield in this fight to win. Probably a 29-28 decision. I think Tracy Cortez can, squeeze around and potentially win 2 rounds, if she follows the game plan that I suggested. But ultimately, I think what's actually going to happen is Blanchfield will win this fight 30-27 or 29-28, most likely. And next up, Roman Kopylov versus Gregory Rodrigues, and this is a great fight to me. I think these are 2 fighters who really do everything well. They both come from wrestling backgrounds. They both believe in their striking, and they both have reason to believe in their striking. A lot of times you see wrestlers fall in love with their striking. I think especially for Gregory Rodrigues, he has every right to fall in love with his striking. Gregory Rodrigues slept Jack Hermanson in his last fight. That was a terrifying KO. Rodrigues could very well be about to do the same thing to Roman Kopylov. And Roman Kopylov is himself a striker. He comes from, a Russian wrestling background, but he chooses to strike. So it's going to be an interesting fight in that way, where it's sort of like it's a fight between 2 guys you would expect to be wrestlers, but are we even going to see the wrestling become a factor? I kind of doubt it. I don't think Gregory Rodrigues is going to let the wrestling become a factor. I think Gregory Rodrigues, combat sports aren't like other sports. In baseball, you see a 33-year-old first baseman, you think, okay, that guy's a little old, that guy's a little over the hill. In martial arts, 33 can be an age where, okay, you might be a little past it physically, but if you train 33, you could still be really close to the peak of your physical fitness. And mentally, the mental game, I think, peaks at that age. And you can see that for Gregory Rodrigues, that he's learned a lot about mixed martial arts, that he understands martial arts in a deeper way that a lot of other people don't. And I think that Gregory Rodrigues actually is a really, really excellent fighter. He's big for a middleweight as well. I think he's going to beat Roman Kopylov in this fight. I think he might even knock him out. I really like this fight. I really like Gregory Rodrigues as a martial artist, and I think that he's got a really good chance in this fight. Now, Bo Nickal versus Rodolfo Viera. And, I was in with the Bo Nickal hate at first because he's 7-0. There's so many fighters in the UFC who go more than 7-0, have been through so much more than Bo Nickal had been through to get the opportunities that Bo Nickal got. So many people go out there and fight for 15 fights, 20 fights, and never get a shot like the one that Bo Nickal did at 7-0. That being said, he's still a very talented wrestler. There's still a place for him in the middleweight division. he's not, he's not the next coming of GSP or anything, but he's a very good mixed martial artist and an excellent wrestler, and definitely too good of a wrestler for Rodolfo Viera, who honestly is just a very average middleweight. And I think that, it is a little bit more friendly treatment towards Bo Nickal. I think this is kind of an easy fight. Rodolfo Viera, he's a competent fighter. He's got a lot to his game. I'm trying to just not call him average because I feel like that's mean, but he is just kind of an average middleweight, Rodolfo Viera. He's a very good striker. He's not a great striker. I wouldn't even say he's as good of a striker as Bo Nickal. He's definitely not as lethal of a striker. He doesn't really have that lethality that Bo Nickal does. His takedown average is kind of average at 3.0, but it's the accuracy at 23% that really doesn't blow me away. Only a sub-average of only 1.03 to Bo Nickal's 2.92. Bo Nickal's takedown accuracy is 53.3. Viera's 23.0. I mean, this is the fight where Nickal can very easily control on the ground, and it's only 3 rounds. So I'd expect a 30-27 out of Bo Nickal, and this fight's honestly kind of supposed to be that way. I think I'll more so reserve my judgment on Bo Nickal as a fighter based on his next outcome after this one. He got pushed up all the way to RDR level way too soon, and now he's, back down the ranks a little bit where he actually belongs as a fighter, fighting the guys that he should be fighting at this point in his career. And let's see if he can get a win and build the basis for a little bit more of a legitimate jump up to top level competition this time, because there's still plenty of time left for Bo Nickal to build an impressive career. And now Beneil Dariush versus Benoit Saint-Denis. And Dariush is a little bit on the older side. I thought his last fight against Renato Moicano was a bit of a snooze fest. And Saint-Denis is definitely the fighter at this point who's more capable of producing action, more capable of producing results, more capable of getting takedowns, more capable of landing big shots, more capable of scoring a knockdown and a knockout. I have no reason not to pick Benoit Saint-Denis in this fight, even though Dariush is a very respected veteran, a very talented fighter, a very smart fighter, and has fought a lot of great fighters throughout his career. I just think Benoit Saint-Denis takes this. I think he's got the youth advantage, but I also think he has a very crucial striking advantage and a very crucial can you have an excitement advantage, an entertainment advantage? Because if you can, then that's what I would say that Benoit Saint-Denis has in this fight. He has the ability to, even if the fight does go to decision, he's the one the judges are probably going to notice. So Leon Edwards versus Carlos Prates. Man, this is a great fight. I'm picking Prates. Not just because of the size and the length. I mean, Leon Edwards is taller than him. That doesn't really seem true to me. Prates is lanky, man. Prates has reach. Yeah, he does have a 4-inch reach advantage. Okay, there it is. Prates is so mean with the striking. He's so mean with the straights. He's so mean with the kicks. Leon Edwards has the name Rocky for a reason. We all know his ability to come back late in fights. I think that Carlos Prates is a great matchup for Leon Edwards for that reason. Right? Big, taller guy, lankier guy, somebody who's really probably, let's be real, going to beat Leon Edwards up on the feet through the first couple rounds of this fight. But later in the fight, when the stamina goes, is Leon Edwards going to be able to land that big counter shot and, change the course of both his and Carlos Prates' careers? We're going to see. Because right now, Carlos Prates is definitely on the come up as a welterweight, rising up towards title contention. A lot of people are saying his name. A lot of people are talking about him just because he has a very impressive and a appealing style of striking that's very fun to watch. He's a very pure kickboxer, actually. But Edwards also has that kickboxing background, so expect this to be a very classic, high-level welterweight exchange. And it's another fight that I wish was 5 rounds. I really wish this fight could go for 25 minutes. Instead, we're only going to get 3 rounds of it. And I think that favors Prates. I think it's less time for Prates to get tired. It's less time for Leon Edwards to, exploit that potential stamina advantage that he may have at the end of the fight. And it's less time for Leon Edwards to, wear Carlos Prates down and try to, make Carlos Prates more tired for those late rounds. I think there's a much higher chance that Prates has a stronger 3rd round in this fight, for example, than he would have in a 5-round fight. I mean, think about it. In this 3rd round, it's going to be, leave it all on the table, lay it all out there. In a 5-round fight, in the 3rd round, somebody like Prates, he wouldn't be, going to, the whole kitchen sink, would he? There would be no circumstance at all where he would be, using all those offensive weapons and trying to, finish the fight. In the 3rd round, there'd be no reason to. That's what the championship rounds are for. So I think a lot of people might think that a 3-round fight favors Leon. I think it favors Carlos Prates. So I'm going to take Carlos Prates in this fight.
Only by decision, though. There's an outside chance of a knockout for either guy, though. These guys are both great strikers and could probably both sleep each other. And now it's a fighter coming off a submission of Leon Edwards and Sean Brady, facing off against undefeated Ecuadorian prospect Michael Morales, who holds a very impressive record of 18-0. This fight, as I said before, has a combined record of 36-1. And it's hard not to pick Brady in this fight because he's a more multifaceted mixed martial artist than Michael Morales. But it's hard not to pick Michael Morales in this fight because Michael Morales is younger, has a massive reach advantage, and in a rarity is probably a better striker than Sean Brady. He might very well be one of the better strikers that Sean Brady has ever faced. So it's a very, very difficult fight to predict, and it's basically got even odds on the sports books, and there's a reason why. It's very hard to bet against Sean Brady in the form that he's in, and it's very hard to bet against Michael Morales being literally an undefeated fighter. And it's not like Michael Morales is exactly some untested commodity. His last two fights, he had Neil Magny. That's a very classic, sort of prove-it fighter, gatekeeper in the UFC, if you will. And then a victory over Gilbert Burns, who's definitely a high-level guy. But Sean Brady is probably the hardest fight of his career so far. So it's very hard for me to pick Sean Brady, but I'll do it. I was bordering on not even making a pick for this fight other than just sit back, grab some popcorn and a beer and enjoy. But I am going to pick Sean Brady because I just don't think that Michael Morales has faced a test like him before. There's a time for everybody's zero to get taken. I just think this is going to be it for Michael Morales. This is a really big stage. This is MSG. And I think Sean Brady is just that little bit more cold-blooded. I think that on that big stage, when the lights come on and when the lights are bright, Sean Brady's his heart's going to be pumping a little slower. He's going to be a little more present and make those little higher IQ decisions, even if, Morales isn't necessarily a unintelligent fighter, a bad fighter. He's got that massive, even if Morales does have that big reach advantage and the youth advantage, I think the youth advantage in this situation may not be such an advantage. So I'm going to take Sean Brady. And now for the real main event. And honestly, I was so excited when I saw this fight got booked. I've thought about making a whole video about Valentina Shevchenko. I think Valentina Shevchenko is, in my opinion, the greatest women's mixed martial artist of all time. Zhang Weili is coming up from strawweight for this fight. She didn't really have to do that. I think for Zhang Weili, this is about her trying to create her moment, a face-off against, potentially the greatest women's mixed martial artist of all time in Shevchenko, so that Zhang Weili can put her own claim on that title, because Zhang Weili already has a claim to that title as one of the greatest women's mixed martial artists of all time. I'm not saying that this fight should determine that title. There's too many different, fighters from history who have claims to that title. You've got Amanda Nunes, of course. I remember Joanna back in the day comes to mind. And then you've got, the history with Rousey and with Cyborg, of course. Even if I think, honestly, I think that Shevchenko and Zhang Weili, I honestly think it's another level of women's MMA above, the Ronda Rousey era. I'm glad that we've come to an era of women's MMA where we really have the truly elite athletes out there competing. Valentina Shevchenko and Zhang Weili completely prove that. And we finally get a 5-rounder on this card, and a fight that deserves to be, so many of these fights deserve to be 5 rounds. So many of these fights I want to see 5 rounds. We finally actually get a 5-round fight here for the women's flyweight world title. I wish both belts were on the line, to be honest with you. I know that literally is not how it works. I don't care. I wish that whoever won this fight could just be seen as the double champion, even though you could never possibly justify having Shevchenko be the 115-pound champion because she has never weighed that, so you can't possibly have her be the champion of that division. I don't care. I want both belts to be on the line. But I just think there's a beast inside Valentina. I think that there's something inside of Valentina that Zhang Weili can bring out. I think that's how great of a fight this is going to be that we're talking about here, right? That actually for each fighter, even though they've been through so much and fought so many championship bouts in their respective careers, I think it is, for both of these fighters, the hardest opponent of their respective careers. And I think what makes this fight so great is that Shevchenko does seem to be a little bit more on the downturn of her career, if you can call it a downturn or a downslide. She's still the champion, but it just hasn't quite been the same. Whereas Zhang Weili, the momentum is still all there. But I don't know how much the weight gain is going to help her. And I think Valentina Shevchenko is really a level of athlete that she hasn't faced before, and a kind of killer that she just hasn't faced before. I think Shevchenko could knock out Zhang Weili in this fight. I think there's a much more of a possibility of that than I think a lot of people are willing to admit. Shevchenko has some crazy finishing instincts, great combinations, obviously legendary head kicks. And for Valentina Shevchenko, it's entirely possible that Zhang Weili is going to try to make herself the aggressor in this fight. And I honestly think that would be a mistake. I think Valentina Shevchenko's purview here is to counterpunch. It behooves her to counterpunch, man. She's got to sit on the back foot and wait for Zhang Weili to try to get inside, to try to determine the range and the distance, and to be there with those big counter shots. That's going to be a really, really key thing here for Valentina Shevchenko, and in hitting Zhang Weili in a way that she hasn't been hit before, which is going to be a very, very key part to winning this fight, and I think is the thing that Shevchenko can do that Zhang Weili can't do back to her. Like, Zhang Weili can knock you out. Zhang Weili knocked out Joanna, for God's sake. I don't think she can knock out Valentina Shevchenko. If she proves me wrong, I will be right back here making my recap video with a big smile on my face, because that would be awesome. But I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean, it wouldn't be awesome. I don't want to see Valentina get slept. But she's my favorite women's MMA fighter, can you tell? But I'm picking her in this fight. I think this is, in a lot of ways, the biggest fight of her career. I think this is supposed to be a bit of a star-making moment for Zhang Weili. I think it could ultimately be just another star-making moment for Valentina Shevchenko. I've often said that Valentina Shevchenko is kind of like the Max Holloway of women's MMA in terms of where she stands, in terms of just respect with the mixed martial arts fan base. I don't think there's a women's mixed martial artist that the MMA fan base respects more. I don't think there are two women's martial artists that the fan base respects more than Zhang Weili and Valentina Shevchenko. Well, maybe Amanda Nunes. But that's it for all my predictions for UFC 322. I'm obviously very excited for this card. This video went on a lot longer than I thought it would. So like and subscribe for more combat sports content. I'm going to keep coming right at it with the content for you guys every single week. And we'll be back Monday, maybe Sunday if we're lucky, with the recap video. So stay tuned for that, guys. Peace out.